Hello everybody and welcome to this LanguageNet MFL SOS webinar. So today joining me is going to be my colleague Elaine, who has got an absolute wealth of experience in many different areas of language teaching and assessment and so on, and just my colleague in LanguageNet, and I'm also a former teacher as well. So hopefully between the two of us we've got quite a bit of expertise and experience that we'd like to share with you today. I'm going to pass over to Elaine to introduce the session and talk about the first few parts. Then I'll be taking over and then we'll be swapping backwards and forwards.
Thank you, Zoe. Hello, everyone. Our first webinar I think I've done this year. So hi, nice to see everybody. As Zoe said, today's session is on creativity and this is what we'll be covering. Obviously, we always try and put the links to teacher standards in there. And I noticed from the chat that there's a few trainee teachers actually joining us. So that might be useful for you, or if you're an ECT or in your second year of teaching, or even if you're you might be a mentor. So you might direct one of your mentees to this to look at it, to look at where the teacher standards are covered. Obviously the why and the challenges, and then I won't read through the rest of it, but you can see there the list of things that we'll be covering. It's interesting to know that a lot of our webinars that we've done do have a lot of creative activities in them. So this is just a flavour of not delving too much into the ones we've already done, but there is a little bit of overlap in some of the slides, just because it is so creative in terms of the activities. Okay, Zoe, so we'll move on to teacher standards then. So obviously looking at teacher standards very briefly, obviously you're going to stimulate the environment. If you're being creative, you're going to create a great environment for your students to learn in. Obviously you're going to find out how they learn, because some of them do learn if they have a creative project ongoing or a creative activity that they can get their teeth into. It will keep their interest and foster their interest and promote their love of learning. And obviously you might do some out of class activities. You might decide to get them to make something or to do something as an end project or something, and make your curriculum really engaging. And it will be very distinctive teaching approaches that you're going to be using if you're creative in the lessons to engage your students. You might use this actual creative activity or creative technique to be part of your formative assessment, as I've done on many occasions, and you will involve and motivate your students. And by being at this session tonight or watching it as a recorded, if you can't manage to see the whole hour with us tonight live, it will be appropriate professional development for you. Okay, so moving on, sorry, to looking at why and the challenges. So why do we want to try and be more motivational with more creative in the lessons? Well, we all probably are really creative. It's just that we probably don't know what we do is creative, or we kind of forget that it's creative. We just do it as normal. Obviously, you want to try and get your children to be motivated to do a language, because obviously EBAC is still around, and if your school has an inspection or something like that, the inspectors often look at the EBAC numbers. It does help with behaviour. I can definitely tell you that from experience of my 18 and a half years I was working in inner city schools, and it does really help if you are creative in your lessons. It gets your students to buy in to the lesson if they see that there's something that they can just be a little bit different with. The costing of it can be sometimes something that might put you off. It could be the financial cost of maybe buying the resources, or maybe having to, to get extra things in that you might need to support your students, and obviously a time cost. Often I thought, well, have I really got time to deliver this in this way? But at the end of the day, I've always thought, little and often, but something that the kids are going to want to buy into will help me to sort of teach languages better and get more students learning the language. And obviously that links to the curriculum time. You might find that you don't have enough time in the curriculum to do it, and often it gets left to be a summer project, or it might be something that's done if you've just happened to have half a class there for half the class being missing for something. But it does mean that you will get a lot of students buying in who might not necessarily buy in if you are creative. I've always tried to work backwards from their end goal. So what was my end goal for this particular half term or block of teaching, and thought, what can I actually do that's creative? And if I have a particular difficult class or a cohort of children that are tricky, I've even taken out of their planners and I've said to them, right, this is what we're going to do on this day that's creative, and they've actually put it in their planner, and boy will they hold you to that date. And I always make it a point of saying, right, in 3 weeks we're going to be doing this, in 2 weeks, in 1 week, and having a countdown. Ideas, and I put a question mark there. It's sometimes a bit difficult to think of creative ideas when you're just ploughing through a curriculum and trying to get as much done as you can in such a short time. We all are so grateful of the ideas that are out there, as Zoe said, on social media. But so tonight, hopefully you'll get a few ideas that you thought, oh, I've done that before, but I've suddenly forgotten about it, or maybe something new. And a lot of people have said, well, actually, I don't have, particularly if you're a non-specialist, my linguistic foundation is not strong enough to do anything creative. Well, actually, that's not necessarily the case, because I remember when I was teaching Spanish in primary schools a few years ago, and I thought, I can't possibly do that, but because my Spanish wasn't up to it. But at the end of the day, the activity itself led it, and I just made sure that what I was dealing with at the time for that creative activity was strong enough to be able to do it. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Zoe now, who's going to talk to us a little bit about film and drama and videos.
Great, thanks very much. And one last thing to add on to that as well, with the strong linguistic foundations that Elaine talked about, obviously your own linguistic foundation, it's also something to bear in mind as your students' linguistic foundation. So depending on the kind of creativity you want, if you want them to be able to express themselves creatively in, say, writing or in speaking, obviously you need to make sure that they have the linguistic foundation in order to do that, so that you have to get the basics before you can experiment with something. So there's two elements to consider there, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just something to bear in mind. Right, yeah, so on to using drama films and videos. So some of you may have seen that we did a whole webinar on using film in with languages. So that's available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, because obviously we've spent a whole hour talking about this, and there is, frankly, most of these areas you could spend an hour talking about. So do check that out if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, these are some things I'm really, really passionate about, using drama films and videos. I've actually got my drama and music dress on today. So if you're using films, you can use those as really good sort of springboards in order to have different exercises related to them. So for example, you could, after having watched the film, you could describe the characters. So if you're doing that topic of describing, you know, physical or appearance or personality, those can be really good. Film stills are fantastic prompts to use as a photo card, and probably a bit more interesting than the kind of exam past ones. So for example, the one you can see here is a picture from The Climb, which is a fantastic film, which I think is still available on Netflix. Really great French film. They can act out scenes. So depending on the level of your students, you can get them to write particular scenes and you recreate and use their own words. Or if you can get hold of the screenplay, then that's a fantastic way of them they can use that as instead of using it like a normal dialogue or role play conversation, they can actually act out that, and that can be a really nice way of doing that. Film review, so you can once you've watched a film, you can get them to write a review about it, sort of what they liked, what they didn't like, maybe look at some of the cinematic techniques. So that can be really interesting. Using songs, again, I talked about this quite a lot more in the previous film webinar that we did, so check that out for a bit more information on that. But lots of films have an important song in them. For example, Vois sur ton chemin is from Les Choristes, amongst many other songs they sing. And I had a really successful activity teaching that to my students, to a bottom set year 9 class who absolutely loved it. And I taught them it works as sort of as a basic round. So even if you're not particularly musical, you can still teach them that, and they absolutely loved it, and they wanted to know what it meant, because somehow if you're more interested in getting the vocabulary of what you're singing than you might be of a reading text, pretty complicated vocabulary, but they wanted to know it, and they really worked on their pronunciation. Another way, if you're a Spanish teacher, Dos Orejitas from Encanto. So even though Encanto is actually obviously a film that's mostly in English, of course you can watch it dubbed into Spanish. The song, that particular song, is written in Spanish. It has really, really beautiful vocabulary. So lots and lots of things that you can do with that. There are various worksheets out there that people have used and put together with gap fills and so on. Yeah, and getting them to sing it themselves as well. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the activities of that, but that's something that you can look at as a source. Another thing I would like to do is doing silent film voiceovers. So either that can be using a pre-made, a pre-existing film. So I mentioned before you could act out scenes of the screenplay. What you can actually do is get them to dub them themselves. So they you play it with the voice, with the volume muted, and then the students read out the screenplay live, and they can either do it in front of the class, or they can actually record it. So most students are able to basically edit something together, either on sort of very simple software that might be available on devices you have in school, or even on their phones as well. Actually, most of them are kind of used to doing that with TikTok and so on, so get them to do that. Another thing you can do is actually film something or use something that isn't even a French or Spanish or German film at all, and get them to write what they think the conversation should be. So this is something I did when I was very early on in teaching. Is we were doing the subject of health and being at the doctor's, and I got all my flatmates at the time to rope them all in. And to be my patients, I borrowed a white coat from the science lab, and I was the doctor, and then they came in one by one. I just set up a camera, and they were just miming various things, miming being sick, or miming having an elbow that hurt or whatever. Obviously with no volume, and then the students had to write their own script for that and do the voiceover for that. And they absolutely loved it. They really enjoyed it, particularly because it was me. They enjoyed dubbing me. If you don't have the time for that, that's fair enough. That's something I did when I was an early careers teacher. You can also find any kind of pre-existing film that you just remove the volume for, or just mute. So that's a really nice activity. Using role plays, I find using props can really help bring students out of their shells, because I know that some students don't like speaking in front of their peers, and particularly in a foreign language, and particularly doing some role play about going to the cinema or whatever that they don't want to do. But it's amazing what a prop can do. So whether it's even just something like a silly hat or wig or glasses, I used to have a whole box of them. I believe Elaine did as well. I think we both had the same approach. Or if you find anything that actually is quite appropriate, so borrowing a white lab coat from science can be great for the health one. Or anything like that, any props that you have can be really useful. And wigwams is an approach that I learnt when I was doing my PGCE. So the way this works is you have a sheet of paper, and you have the conversation sort of each side of the conversation on one half of it. So you fold the piece of paper in half like this. It's kind of bit difficult to show over a webcam. So you have A's conversation was here in the target language, and B's conversation here. So you can put it between the two, and they can read out their part of the dialogue. You can underline certain parts of the dialogue, and then once they've got used to reading out the dialogue, they can then maybe change some of the translations. So instead of saying, oh, well, let's meet at 4 o'clock, they say let's meet at 5 o'clock or whatever. And then once they've got really comfortable with that, what you can do is you can turn it over, and on the other side, so double printing, then you can have the English translation, and then you can try to get them to do it from the English translation instead of the French or Spanish or German translation. And what's clever about this one is because they've got the one on the other side, if they need help, they can just lift up and have a look. I have templates for this if anyone is interested, so please do just email me to zoe@languagenut.com. Basically, once you've worked out how to get it to print and which way you need the text to be, it's really easy to edit and put your own translations in. And I found that such a great way to support role plays, but also then allow them to be creative as well and change things, but in a very kind of supportive way, to make that accessible for everyone else. Still on the subject of role plays, you can film students' role plays if they're happy for you to do that. Obviously, keeping that only within school, and they can sometimes really like that, or they can film each other, of course, and it's really nice for them to see, and especially if they've done something they've been proud of. They could make music videos. So if you have done a song, they often quite like sort of doing the lip syncing and so on, and doing a music video of that, or if there's a song that you have actually taught them, so it's not a pop song, not a pre-recorded one, but it's one that you just sing in class, particularly at primary level, or say Key Stage 3 level if you're in the UK, secondary, then yeah, doing music videos so that they actually record themselves. And I've actually seen various ones on YouTube where schools have done, you know, ich put the E on, for example, for all the conjugations in German. There's some fantastic ones there. Or school tours is another one. So if you're doing the subject of school, something I always used to get them to do is to write a tour of the school in the target language, and then they would go around and film it, you know, sort of saying, you know, voici la cantine or whatever, and maybe a bit more information if they can. So that's a really nice project that they love to do. You can also get them to make different kinds of videos, so grammar or vocab teaching videos. So, you know, get them to make resources, especially if you're getting towards the end of a topic and you want to sort of consolidate all that and revise that, or if you're getting ready for an exam, then get them to make videos for each other, because I think they're more likely to watch each other's videos, and it'll probably sink in a bit more than your own ones or ones that are from YouTube. And of course, any videos that you make, any films that you make, having an Oscar ceremony is a really nice way to do it at the end. So then you get, either you can select or your students can vote on, you know, the best use of language or the funniest video or best acting or whatever. That can be really fun. So one thing I did is back in the day with Expo, I used to teach with Expo, and there was a unit on Crime au Château, which was a murder mystery, and I got my students to write their own murder mystery. It was obviously, it's very scaffolded, but they filmed it, and so yeah, they all filmed these amazing mysterious murder mysteries, and they really enjoyed that. And then they voted on the Oscars for that. And as part of that, you can see there's a picture of someone in a trench coat. That's actually my husband. I roped in, who's also a French speaker. So he was he was Inspector Escargot, I think, who sort of did an introduction to the crime, and then that was a sort of a stimulus video that they then recorded their own sort of responses to. So yeah, lots of things you can do with film. And then finally, it doesn't have to be a video, and particularly because some students don't like using videos, they're a bit shy about that. They can make a podcast or a radio show, and that's something that in one school I taught at, that was actually the end product of a whole term based on sort of media things, where we'd looked at the weather forecast, we looked at film reviews, we'd looked at interviews and so on, and then over the course of that term they produced, you know, a series of creative pieces, an interview, a weather report, and so on. And then at the end, they recorded them all, edited them together, and then we played them at the end. So, you know, in the final lesson before term was we listened to everybody's radio shows, and they were absolutely fantastic. They really enjoyed it, and it's really not difficult for students to do, I think. So yeah, lots of ideas there. Next, using music. So again, a real sort of passion of mine. You could do lots of really great projects with music. So one of my favorite things I used to do in my most recent school was the Eurovision Song Contest. We used to do every summer in the summer term for year 7. So each class would learn a song and a little dance routine that went with it and film it, and then we'd watch them all and they'd all vote on them. So you can see these are my darling little year 7s who did Ober Ammergau, which is a really fun German sort of tongue twister song, and they made themselves sort of vague Dirndls and Lederhosen, and they danced to it and sang to it, and it was fantastic and really great for motivation, particularly in the summer term. Karaoke is another thing that you can do. So there are 2 ways you can do this. You can either find songs that are on in the target language, you know, on YouTube or whatever, either karaoke versions or ones where everyone just sings along, make sure the lyrics are there, and they can just sing along with those. The other thing you can do is get them to translate songs that they know into the target language. You kind of need to be a little bit higher level for this. This is really sort of Key Stage 4 level. Again, I'm saying Key Stage 4 for the UK, for England and Wales. So, but so basically, you're 15, 16-year-olds. If you're a German teacher, Alexi Bexi is the absolute master of this. He has translated loads of songs into German. He can't sing for toffee, but it doesn't matter. They absolutely love it because it's just, they really love singing these these songs that they know, but translate into German. And that's a really fun project. So one lesson, or for homework, they would translate it, and then in the the next lesson, and this would usually be my sort of treat just before Christmas for my year 11s, after they'd done their speaking exams and their mock exams and everything. And so it's the last lesson. That's Frau Thorne's karaoke was kind of a known thing in the school, which is good fun. So that's great. You could listen to songs, and they could do some kind of reviews of different songs. So that can work in actually quite a young age or beginner level. So you can see I've got a sort of template here, where I would show some different songs, different genres in French, and then I would get them to say, what to identify the genre if we've been learning that, to say where they liked it with sort of emojis and so on, maybe give a reason why that is, and give it a mark out of 10, as if they were on The Voice or X Factor or whatever, and they really enjoyed doing that, and that exposes them to a different different types of music. And then often what I might do is, as a class, we'd vote on the best one, and we would then learn that one or do something with that song in the end of the term or something. There were loads of ways in which you use songs as text, because of course they are full of wonderful vocabulary and grammatical structures and so on. They're brilliant sources of texts, which are innately more motivating than most reading texts, just by being songs. So it's quite a good way of actually sort of sneaking students into doing reading comprehensions or listening comprehensions. So lots of ways here. You can do a gap fill, of course. So you have gaps, and either with a reservoir of words or not, and get students to note those down. Spot the intruder, so that's where you could have some lyrics on there, and you add some extra words in there which aren't in the song, but would make sense, and they have to sort of cross out the words that aren't there. You can have stand up when, whatever, stand up when you hear this particular kind of word, stand up, or you can give students a particular, give them a word in the song, and they stand up when they hear their word, or get at a high level. It could be grammatical structure, or every time you hear a job, or every time you hear an adjective, or whatever, depending on the song. Find the synonym or find the translation. So you could give them either words, synonyms in the target language, so other ways of saying words that are in it, and they have to find them, or you could give them a translation of certain words, and they can try to find those as quickly as possible. Actually, finding the translation can often mean that helps them, especially if it's at phrase level. That can actually, they're often easier to find phrases that might actually be out of their vocab level, because they can see bits of it, and it's really helping them to deal with unfamiliar words. Actually, finding the rhymes, so you can actually do it before you've looked at it, particularly with languages like French, German and Spanish, which are generally they have their phonetic rules, so you should be able to work out which words rhymes, which words rhyme, which words don't, in the way that you can't always with English. Then you listen to check. And then finding structures, so you can get to highlight the text, the lyrics. So for example, when I was doing imperfect, I would teach Joe Dassin. There is an old one. I would tell them they were cheesy, but they still loved it. L'équipe à Jojo is full of imperfect tense, so I get them to highlight all the different imperfect tenses, and then there's loads of present tense for the comparison and so on. So you can use this really great reading text. Then of course singing. What's the point of music if you're not going to sing it? And I find personally that students up for singing, usually at the younger end and then at the older end as well. There's a point where they hit sort of 13 or 14 where they get a bit self-conscious. It depends on the class, but that's, year 9 is kind of sometimes a bit tricky. Some of them are up for it, some of them aren't. It really depends how you put it, but I find that then after they get older, they kind of they can do it ironically, and they quite enjoy it. So the ways to make that interesting, you can have to sing in teams, whatever, different tables, or how sides of the classroom, like panto style, who can sing it older, who can sing it louder. Volume control is a nice one, so they're singing and then you mime as if you're turning the volume down. On an old, shows my age, in an old school analog stereo, and they have to go quieter, or you can do it louder like this as a conductor, or you can do it faster as well, or slower. and they have to respond. Pick up song is another one where it's like they have on, I'm sorry, I don't have a clue if anyone is again old enough to listen to that. So you play the CD or play the file, and they're singing along, and then you turn the volume down but keep playing it. So they have to keep singing without it as a class, and then after 10 seconds or whatever, you turn the volume back up and they see if they've kept time with it. And often they want to do that a few times, so it's a great way of getting them to keep doing it over and over again. And also song relay is another way to get them to do it over and over again. So you get you can either do it group by group or even person by person in small groups if they're up for it, so they have to do a word at a time in the song. That's probably best without accompaniment, and see how quickly they can get through the song. You know, one student, one word, and it doesn't have to be sung at that point. It can just be said if they don't want to sing. Disappearing text. This is where you put lyrics up on the board, and then they're singing through, and this is one again where they sing over and over and over and over again. So best with a sort of shorter song, or maybe just a chorus. And you gradually start putting splodges on the board, or hiding things on the interactive whiteboard, so they have to remember more and more of the words. So that's, yeah, you can get them to sing it 10 times and they haven't realized that's what you're doing. You're really embedding all that pronunciation and vocab and so on into their heads without them realizing, but they're having a good time. And you can do guess the rhythm as well. So you can do that in pairs. You take one of them, selects a line from the song, and they clap the rhythm. So for example, if it was au bord de la rivière, it'd be, they just have to guess what the line is. You can do, as I mentioned, music videos before. Lip syncing. Lip sync competitions are, I think, really popular because of various TV shows, and also in YouTube and TikTok and so on. That's what they like to do. So you can either do it live in class, who can lip sync this the best, and especially again with maybe the younger and less self-conscious ones might be up for that, or they can film it. And then again, branching out into more creativity, if it's a very formulaic type of song, they could write new words or new verses to it. So if you've got some kind of song where they're maybe not so much a pop song, but if you've got a sort of a song that's been written for language learning that has a particular structure, they might be able to write another verse for that. Or you can highlight or underline particular words in the lyrics, and then ask them to change those to make it about something else. And finally, on music, I also found that using background music, so even if we're not doing anything about the particular song, if they were just getting on doing some writing or something, particularly back when we used to have the coursework and they used to have to spend a lesson writing, or if they're doing maybe an older for the older students, if they're doing a longer piece of writing, for 10-15 minutes or so, I would actually play the background, so Bayern 3 or something for German, or Energie for French, and because lots of students do that at home, they have their music on when they're working anyway, and for lots of students that just really helps the flow a little bit, gets them relaxed, gets them to feel a bit more creative, and also you can use that, if I would also say, I'm putting it at this very, very low volume. If you talk over it, you won't be able to hear it. And if it's too loud, and I think it's because you're trying to hear it, or you're trying to be heard over it, then I'll just turn it off. So that's a really nice way of getting that just a very low level buzz, and very relaxed atmosphere when you're writing. So lots of music. So I know I'm having an eye on the time. I will try and whiz through these. So poetry, you can use most of those things. You can use the poetry because, of course, a poem still has rhythm and so on. You can exploit those rhymes and those rhythms. And what I really love with poetry is, similar to songs, you can often expose students to vocabulary that you wouldn't normally in normal reading texts, but because they can really enjoy the sounds. And both of these poems I've picked out, so a German one, a French one, have something really lovely about them. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Wenn die Möpse Schnäpse trinken sounds so nice that even if they don't understand it, they kind of really want to know what it means. So I'll just read the first bit. Wenn die Möpse Schnäpse trinken, wenn vor Spiegel Igel stehen, wenn vor Föhren Bären winken, wenn die Ochsen boxen gehen. They love all these packed together rhymes. It's really, really nice. That works even at primary level, because it's really nice one. And the Dans Paris one, it's quite nice because that's a really good one where they can write their own versions of it, you know, because it has this very formula, you know, dans Paris il y a une rue, dans cette rue il y a une maison, and so on. So they can do that, and then the fact that it reverses as well is really, really nice. And then arts and crafts. So this is, yeah, kind of generically all other sort of artistic creative things. School art treasure hunt. So I've got an example of it here. So this is what I used to do in art. We used to have a week of languages at my last school. I went around the school and found various beautiful pieces of artwork that were on the walls, mostly done by students. I wrote descriptions of them, and then students had to go around in groups and read the descriptions and find those and take photos of them and come back, so I knew that they'd found the correct one. So really nice way of getting them to practice photo descriptions and the language used for photo descriptions, but applied to, you know, their peers' work, which they really liked. And also, again, with mixing art and photo descriptions, so one sort of series of lessons that we used to do, we would look at an artist's work. So that might be Klimt in German, for example, or Monet in French. This is something you could actually do with team teaching with an art teacher, if you've got some colleagues who are, you know, up for doing something together. So they might actually be them painting some things in that style. We would look at the colours, we would look at descriptions, prepositions, all that stuff, which is really useful for the photo description tasks in if your exam board has those. Then they would create their own, so it could be in your class or it could be in an art class, and then they would write about it and they would write a description of it. And then finally I would do a gallery walk, so I put them all up, you know, around on the wall. If you are lucky enough to have someone, you know, a sort of TA or somebody who could help frame them, make it look really, really nice, do a really nice display, that's brilliant. And then I scaffolded them, gave them some phrases to talk about them, and to, you know, give their opinion and so on, obviously in a very positive and constructive way, because this is their peers. And we did a sort of, you know, gallery opening. I think I even had squash or schlur or something, as if, you know, they had glasses of wine, they were going around, and we had this wonderful lesson. I remember, you know, with year sevens all talking in German, you know, about, oh, you know, these paintings that they'd done, as if, and they really felt like they were at an art gallery, and that was really nice. A fashion show, if you're doing topics of clothes, so you could either get them to plan to bring in their own clothes for a session, you know, in pairs or small groups, or you can also get them to make their own clothes out of you know, bin bags and, yeah, plastic carrier bags and so on, recycling those. This is me wearing my dindle, which is I used to do. We did that, and then we would have a fashion show where the models would walk up and down the catwalk, and then the others would give a description and say, you know, this person is wearing, you know, blue jeans and a yellow top and so on. I think it's brilliant, and then, you know, we'd interview people in the audience to say, what do you think about it, and so on. So quite a lot of work and a lot of scaffolding, but a really fantastic kind of project and really nice treat at the end for them to do that. And finally, you can make board games. So, you know, Trivial Pursuit, Monopoly, Ludo, Cluedo all work really nicely. This is an example of £1 Million Drop, which is a sort of a digital version which got made. But you can also, of course, make physical ones where they can practice some vocabulary, grammatical structures, and so on that they've done. And then what's really nice is, of course, they've got to think about this. It consolidates everything they've learned in that term, but also then you can play each other's games as well, so you can do that for revision. That's a really nice way of doing that. Okay, and speaking of which, I'm going to move on to pass over to Elaine, who
thank you, Zoe.
this Monopoly board.
Some great ideas there, which I'm sure you'll be able to pick up some of them to use tomorrow in your classroom. So this is an example of the Spanish Monopoly board, which I can't take credit for this. This I found during COVID, where the students could work on their own over a number of lessons, or even as a project, I guess, if you felt that you know, you maybe one of your members of staff's off and it's just an ongoing project that they work on in groups or individually. There's the Spanish one. We've got the templates for that, and then we've got the German one on the next page, and sorry, the French, and then there is the German. So, like, you know, Zoe mentioned about the templates earlier on for the wigwams. If you wanted the templates for those, we can send you them. Our email addresses are at the end on the final slide, but it's just our first names at languagenut.com. Okay, so some of the things that I've done, a little bit of creativity of behaviour. I've as I said earlier, I've taught some very challenging students over my time in teaching. I've often got them to come into the classroom and they've come from a lesson, maybe they've had a really bad day at home, they've come in the morning, things have not gone very well. So I've kind of had an imaginary, if not at one time, I had a proper suitcase at the door, which I would have on the outside of the door. And I would say to them, right, unpack all your problems and put them out of your head, unpack them out of your head and put them into the suitcase. And let's close that suitcase and let's stop any of those issues that have gone on before coming into the lesson. That's just a bit of creativity about how you can sort of try and get some students who have difficulty with forgetting what's gone on in the previous lesson to actually come to your lesson in the right frame of mind. And I've even had students leave my lesson and ask to open the suitcase because they wanted to put those memories and issues back in their heads, which you might consider to be a little bit strange, but some students really do buy into that. You'd be amazed at how they will if you set the stall out right for them. And so we said earlier, music to complete your activities is a great one to have on in the background. Whether you're a French, Spanish or German teacher, there's lots of different music out there that you can use. I've also used normal music, and I've had students who have done really well over a course of number of lessons. I've said to them, what kind of music would you like to listen to in the lesson? And if we've been working on something that they've had to work on over maybe half an hour or 20 minutes or so, we've listened to that music. Also, I've used music as well to get students to do things quickly, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a piece of music from the country of the language that we're learning, but it could be something like Mission Impossible or something like that, just to kind of speed up the actual activity and get them to work faster. It's always important when you've got kids learning languages, what's in it for me. So I've always thought about having a stepped reward system, and that's been something that's helped me to be able to get the creativeness going, whereas I've not gone straight in with a phone call home or even with a letter home. I've stepped that reward over about 30 steps. And I'm more than happy to share my stepped rewards pyramid with you so that you can see how you don't necessarily have to go in straight away with the good big rewards, because often in the heat of the lesson, if you've had a child who's done something really well, you kind of say, oh, I'm going to send you a letter home, because maybe you've had 20 lessons with them and they've been so bad, and you've put them in there and thought, well, I'll send a letter home. There's lots of little things in between that a student will appreciate, rather than just going for the big ones, because once you've sent a letter home, you think, right, where do I go from now? The next thing up is going to be, it could be, you know, I don't know, 20 million house points or something. It's just stepping those rewards. And one of the things I've done to get that buy-in to creative, to allow me to do the creative lessons, has been having points. So for me, mini whiteboards have been a lifesaver. And whenever I've been working on them, the students have tallied up in the top of the whiteboard. They've put them in little gates of 5, 10, 15, and I've awarded points as we've gone through. It could be for oral work. I've just gone, I'll do this in English because obviously we've got different language speakers here. So 3 points, 1 point, 2 points, that half get 4 points, that half get 5. And I've been really quick with doing it. And you get your students to buy into that. And then at the end of the lesson, they've added up the points. And that's a really good way of getting numbers into the lesson and revising numbers. And then they've put those in the back of their books with the date, and then as we've gone on, we've counted the points up, and maybe 10 points would be worth a sticker, 20 points might be worth a sticker, and then those stickers would go towards my stepped pyramid, of which they would have a copy in their book, so that they could then see how many points they'd awarded. Secret student was something, again, you might have used this, where you selectively, secretly choose a student in your class who, if they do well in that lesson, the whole class get a reward or a house point, or that student will get double or something like that. And the kids are always keen to know who the secret student is. The first few times I do it, I usually put it on a post-it underneath the chair, and then I say to the right, I want you to all stand up and look under your chairs, and if you've got the post-it, you're the secret student. And if you've behaved well, or you've kind of like participated thoroughly in the lesson today, then you can choose someone else in the lesson to get that reward with you. And then obviously they get used to that. Well, I'm going to look under this chair this week. Well, actually it's not there, it might be behind the cupboard, and or under my desk or something like that. And it's just a fun way to get students to be in that frame of mind, to allow you to deliver some of the activities that Zoe's talked about in her in the first half of the session. We obviously have class competitions, and if you are on if you're on a trial for Language Nut, or you've used Language Nut a few times, you'll know that we have lots of class competitions. So we said at the beginning, there's one running at the moment for the UK and all across the world. We also have Language Nut Live, which helps to get those students engaged. And I'll talk about the chips in a minute, but this slide here is Mari Alioro, which you can see, which when Esmeralda did the session last week, she talked about resources from Mari, and you can get those free, and you can interactively have those on your screen. And you can actually, if you use Genially or you want to integrate it into whatever you want to do, the girl can smash the piñata and you will get points for your students. Okay, Zoe, so we move on to the next slide then. So here we've got, this is an idea that I've used a few times, but Fiona, one of our team who looks after A-level, explained it beautifully in one of her sessions a few weeks ago, where you can start with 100 chips for vocab recall. Maybe you give your students that, they can have them in a jar or in a plastic wallet, and they place the bets on how many questions they think they'll get right, and then how many questions they think they got right, particularly in a particular assessment or a particular piece of work. And then they have to choose double or nothing on their original bet, and then the students work out the winnings. Again, it's a little bit of cross-curricular, it's a little bit of fun, and it's something that I've done in a form of this when I've been doing formative assessment or even some formal assessments to get particularly difficult children to engage with assessment rather than just sitting there and writing nothing in an exam or an assessment. And again, you can use it with your students at any time. Okay, so we move on to creative assessment then. I think we've got some pictures on here as well, Zoe, that you just want to flash on if they'll come. Oh yeah, so to make the creative assessment, I've had, maybe they make a bingo card at the end of the lesson and they use vocab and phrases from that lesson, and I may well take those in and look at them and actually give them a mark for it, or at least log that on my system as to how many they can retain from that lesson. They don't know they're doing an assessment, but you do, and then you randomly hand out the bingo cards at the beginning of the next lesson for your class to actually to play bingo as a starter. Again, you can do that sort of thing with a noughts and crosses game. So they actually draw the grid with 9 in and they put the words in. They do that from memory at the end of the lesson. Again, they don't know it's an assessment, but you can take that in, you can assess it as you will, and then hand it out for them to play next lesson. They might again prepare a mind map to show what they've learnt. And again, they don't see that as an assessment. It's a drawing, a really nice thing to do. They could use colour, as I've talked about rainbow writing. I'll talk about that in a moment. And again, that's a really nice way of assessing them creatively, but they don't know they're being assessed. Bit more traditionals, where they write a short paragraph in the target language or in English for your partner to translate at the start of the next lesson. Again, that could be something that you could take in. If it's in the target language, you could look at it and see how they've done in terms of their lesson retention in the lesson. They could record a dialogue with the students, so they could do this as ways I've done this for students who don't want to be on camera, or if you feel uncomfortable recording your students on camera, I've actually got them to sit behind a mask, whether that be a paper plate or a picture of someone that you've downloaded or they've downloaded or they've even drawn it, and they've put their words on the back and they've said the dialogue and you've recorded it, and then you could then use that with another class as an assessment. So I've actually done that myself. I've had, say, a dozen kids, well, maybe 30 kids in the class. They've all done a dialogue, they've recorded it either on a device or if you're allowed phones, and you've managed to get hold of it in one area, and then I've chosen 6 or 7 to use as a proper assessment with another class. and they know that it's their peers that have recorded it, but they have no idea who's sitting behind the mask or who's on the audio. And we've done a little bit of a fun sort of thing where maybe we've varied the success criteria. When they've been listening, they've had to answer questions based on it, or they've maybe had to guess who was behind the mask or who's on the recording, or they might have checked on, you know, they've had to comment on accents or pronunciation, or even commented about confidence in the way that they speak it. Or I might have asked one pair to do it in a sad voice and one pair to do it in a happy voice, or one to do it angrily or breathless, out of breath, and so on like that. So then they've had to sort of listen to it in a different kind of scenario to a normal listening activity which you would meet. The till roll writing is something which came as an idea from my thing that we will see a little bit later on, and I'm mindful of the time. Whereas I've got the long sort of pieces of wallpaper, and I've used them for the students to write on or for the kids to draw on. The till rolls that you buy, you get them from Amazon. They're about 20 quid for, I don't know, 25 rolls. And the students have written on the till rolls. And for some students, I've cut the till roll shorter than for the more able. So the more able have written a longer till roll, and the shorter one has been for the students who can't manage to write as much, or they've chosen their own length of till roll that they want to write on. It's quite fun, is that, getting the students to write on a till roll for their assessment. The snake writing that you see on the right hand side there is, I've said to the students, write on draw a snake on your paper, or even draw a line on the page, which is the next one down. And I've said to them, right, for your assessment today, I want you to write like I've shown you there. So that's encouraging them to write longer sentences but shorter. So it's a bit like the exam that they do, where they get peaks and troughs. So you get a hard question and an easier question, and it's just a little bit of fun, really. And then what I've then done is I've maybe asked, I've written my comments at the other side of the snake, or I've just said to them, right, I want you to write this far in the lesson, and I've gone and drawn a line on the paper. And that way, you know that a student who is less able will not have to write as much as a student is who is more able. The rainbow writing I've done quite a lot in assessment, because students, if they're writing in different colours, I've given them some felt pens or some crayons. And I know that's scorned upon sometimes to buy those for your department, but they do have a use at times. And I've got them to write a piece of writing in the target language in different colours. And it could be that you ask them to do it for different verbs or for different nouns, or for, you know, for different parts of language, or I've just given them free rein to write it in that. And I've had some of the most gorgeous work come in from some students who would normally be quite demotivated if they know they can write in colour. And then the phonics driving test is something that I've always had since my very early days in teaching, from 1988 really. We've always worked on phonics. It's maybe we were ahead of our time in the school I worked at the beginning, but I've done all the time, and we've always had that phonics testing. Phonics has been in and out of fashion over the years in lots of different ways, but now it's very in. So the phonics driving test, if you wanted a copy, I can give you the instructions on how it works, is a great way to be creative with assessing your students on their phonics and their read aloud. Okay, Zoe, if you can move on to the next thing, please. Yeah, so again, for this one, I might have given them what I call a rolling slide. So on the side, you've got ce soir and travail bien bénévole, and they've had to, that's all they've been given. They've had to then create me a paragraph based on that, and they can say whatever they want within that paragraph. I might also, on the middle one, I might give 4 students, so a group of 4 students, they would take 2 each of those, and they would have to put me some sentences together that were which contained some of the vocabulary that were in those sheets in that particular box. So you might get examples of connectives and examples of present tense verbs, and they've had to put those in to a paragraph, and then they've joined together with a pair and then with a 4 to come up with an extended piece of writing, to try and make it make sense. And then I'll talk a little bit about the other one on consequences on the next slide, Zoe. I think that is on the next one. Yeah, there it is. So this is something, those of you that are of a certain age, certainly when I was at school, we used to play consequences. And I've done this with students who've done bodies, like they've had to draw the hair. So I've gone hair, so Haare, then they've had to draw Augen, and then they've opened it up and they've seen the full body. It's been quite fun. But how you can use this with languages is you can see the paper is down, it can be folded 6 times. So you give them a grid like this maybe, and they could either use a dice and shake it, and whatever number it comes up with, they have to write on there. If they're playing in pairs, that's okay. Or they can choose, like from the first box, I said to them, right, I want you to choose something from the first box and write it. So obviously, je préfère, and then they take something from the second one, aller au cinéma, and then it goes around. And what you do is you do it, you roll it over, and then you pass it to the next person. So it goes to 6 different people around the class. A variation of that is you can choose, the pupils can choose to have it in English. You could do it in English, and they then decide, well, which of those 6 can I do best, which can I translate? So you're giving them a choice from the grid to show what they can actually do, and they would then write that, and they would then pass it on. Or they might even decide just to keep, you might decide not to play consequences, you might decide just to keep that as one grid so that they're choosing it. But I find it's great when you're passing it around the 6. Once you get to the 6th person, they then unfold it and they can then read aloud what they've got in front of them. So that's a great way of actually a great way of practicing their read aloud. Or they can dictate it to their next door neighbour, either showing them the grid, but probably not, so turning the grid over. And as Zoe talked about with the wigwams, they maybe get 3 lives to look at the grid 3 times and just check the spelling that way. And that way you're practicing your dictation and you're practicing your read aloud. So there's lots of things you can do with that. In terms of that, once you've actually then done it, you might decide to get them to put it into the il form. So il préfère aller au cinéma avec ses parents, and so on. Or you could do it as a plural thing or change the tense. There's lots of different things you can do with that. Okay, so if you can move on to the next slide, please. So these are I've actually got my bookmarks here. If you can see them, these. I'll just turn this light off because that light might be doing it. So that's no better really. But these are the bookmarks you can buy from any of your local, like we have YPO where we are. I've disappeared off screen there. Sorry, there I am. So what I've done here is supporting the students. So they've made their own bookmarks, either with things that they want to include on their work, and that for if they have a bookmark, they can just see it constantly all the time. They're using it in their French book, German, Spanish book, or in their textbook. They might even, in the end, have their answers to their questions on the bookmark that they can just keep referring to. Or anything that you feel would be beneficial to them. You can make it really personal, or you can have the bookmarks and say, right, I want you to make sure that you include these 10 things in your writing. Because one of the things as an examiner myself, I've always found that when I'm marking the speaking at GCSE, you get the same students getting the same questions and the same answers time and time again. And as an examiner, if you kind of listen to that, you're questioning your mind what's going on with those students. So I guess at the end of the day, you just have to think, well, how can I make the students really, really stand out a little bit in my class? We'll all do slight variation. So if you do use the same questions, as I know a lot of us do, just have a little bit of variation for your students and give them their personal bookmark, or allow them either to choose or direct them to stuff that you know your students can manage, rather than trying to give them something that's completely so overwhelming that if they try and learn it off by heart, they might miss sort of 2 or 3 words, and then it becomes nonsensical to an examiner or anybody who's actually trying to mark it. Okay, so the next one. And then here we've got being creative. Well, like Zoe said, having a dressing up box. When I left my last job, on my last day when I went in to see my boss, he said to me, you know, we'll always remember you, Elaine, by your dressing up box and all your big bags that you used to carry around. But you know what? It always worked. So we've got there that second picture of, I would use questions and answers. So, you know, the kids asking questions might wear a tie. The kids giving the answers might wear a hat, or glasses and garlands like that. Again, when I talked earlier about the cost of it, that can be an issue if you're not careful. So it's a case of where and how you get them. I don't think I'm going to finish before 5 o'clock, so I'm struggling to race through this. But so we've got lots of things there. You can see the Oscars, loads of different pictures there of type of things that I've used in the past to get kids to do, writing on balloons and so on. Move to the next one, Zoe. And the balancing clowns and butterflies, again, you can get your students, I've got templates for these if you want them. You can get your students to make these or make them for homework, or to make them in language club, or even on the back of them then put your words and get the students to walk around saying the words, practicing their read aloud. You might get them to do a little bit of culture, a little bit of cultural stuff, making buildings that are in the towns and writing words on the buildings to sort of show that they can spell properly. Move to the next one, Zoe. Thanks. And then this has got some pictures with it. Again, talking about, I've used this activity many times at the end of teaching, where you go and get some, they might have a white t-shirt at home, or you could go and ask some of the bigger stores if they'll let you have them. I remember going to Primark in Leeds, and they let me have 200 t-shirts for £50. So when I told them I was working in a school and I just wanted some stuff for the kids to write on, I always write on it in pen that washes out, so we can use them again and again and again. And if your SLT are pretty sort of happy for you to let them wear them the few days before the exams, or on the morning of the exam, or the day before the exam, just to have a little bit of revision there. And then we've got the wristbands, which again you can buy off Amazon or eBay, where the kids can put words to learn or sentences, and just the colours can be relevant to certain parts of language, or they can just be handed out randomly. And then obviously the big paper there is where I got the students to, one of the kids to lie on the floor in a group of 3, and then they put words, that the verbs to do with parts of the body, or parts of the body, or anything to do with that, just helps them to sort of remember. And then we use that as a display, actually. And then if you move on to the next one, Zoe, Zoe's talked about a lot of these, but the more variety you can have in your teaching with things, the better. And this is where, when you're sticking rigidly to a scheme of work because you've been told to do that, or that's policy in your school, it can sometimes be very, very, very stifling. And so it's important to try and bring a bit of variety into your students' lesson. A clothes topic that I used to sometimes do is I used to go into school wearing about 10 loads of clothes, and I'd just say, right, that's that, take them off at the time. And the kids used to look at me and think, what are you doing? But they used to remember those clothes. Another thing I did once was, a few times actually, when I think about it, I got a member of staff to turn up to my lesson wearing some bizarrely different coloured clothes, and they'd leave. They would just come in and say, I'm just bringing this book into you, and they would leave, and I'd say to the kids, what was that student wearing? And then in the past tense, so what was that teacher wearing? So and so was wearing. And then we brought in the past tense with the different topic, the different clothes items, and that was a good starter activity. When you're doing I prefer, I don't like, I might try, so I've done things with like senses. So I've done like maybe perfumes, or I've done smells of items of coffee or chocolate, items of things that you might want to taste, like different fruits or things, just to try and get them. I remember one doing it with different flavors of tea, and that way they buy into that, and they just see, oh, it's quite interesting, is this, I want to have a go at that. Obviously props, costumes and wigs are so important. If you can get your students to engage with that, they love dressing up and doing all sorts of things. Writing on tablecloths, if your school's happy for you to write on the desks. I know some staff are not, even if some schools are not happy about that, but it's something that I've done. I've also bought lots of cheap tablecloths, and I know we try and be as environmentally friendly as we can, but when it comes to education, we sometimes have to do this to get those students to learn. I've even got boxes from the supermarket, covered them in paper, and boys particularly like writing on different shaped boxes. I have absolutely no idea why, but they do. And I've just chucked them in a corner, and then when it's been their time to write again, we've pulled them out and they've written on boxes, and that way they've engaged with writing. Mini whiteboard uses, I could spend 5 hours on that. There's so much that you can do with different sessions, with different things with mini whiteboards. I'll leave that particular one because I think if you're interested, I can send you my page document. With bodies, again, when I've done bodies, I've tried to do something a bit Halloweeny. So I've got a rubber glove, filled it with water, put it in the freezer, and taken it in the next day, and they've had to put their hands into it and said it was a hand. Or I've peeled grapes and they've been eyes. Or I've done peanuts and they've been fingernails. Just something a little bit different in a bag where they've had to put the hand in. just to start off the lesson. Mirrors, I keep mirrors in my classroom so that the students can look at how the words are said, and they can use their phone if you're allowed phones. Karaoke we've talked about, and Karamba I think is on that list. So if you can put the pictures on it, I'm really going to finish it in a couple of minutes. There's Karamba in the bottom right hand corner. You can see there where the students get lollipop sticks, and you put the word in English on one side and language on the other, put them in a pot, and they pull out the words. And if they get it right, they keep it and they have another go. And if they get it wrong, they have to put all the sticks back. They put the stick back in. If they pull out Karamba, they have to put all the sticks back in. And that really doesn't go down very well with some of them. And then here we've got some sticks where you can write the top of the word and the bottom of the word, and then you mix them up and they have to match them up to actually find the words. Okay, and then moving on, that in itself is fairly straightforward. I think making masks, which we've got there, where you can put the actual dialogue or the words on the back, and you can actually film them, or they can go around talking to each other behind a mask. Making a time capsule where they put lots of information into it, and then you bury that somewhere in school, and then the next year round they actually go and pick it out of where you've buried it. Could even be in a cupboard somewhere, and the class read what the year before have done and what they've done with their work. They might write a letter or something like that. Clocks is something that I was talking to one of my colleagues at Language Nut about today, about how you can use a clock. Actually making a clock, again, a very simple way to do it is with a paper plate, and you put a twist key, not a twist key, a split pin in, and you make some beautiful hands for it, and you decorate it, and you can use that then for telling time and just teaching your students how to do it. And you do a listening, you ask them to do that, and instead of writing it, they show it on the clock, and they show you what the time is. The pebble stones, again, you can go around collecting pebbles and the students write on them, or they bring a pebble to the classroom. The same with leaves and sticks. Go out and bring those, go and actually collect them if you're in primary, and bring them in, and they write words with leaves and sticks on their desk. That's quite fun. Making a pencil case at the end of the when you do your pencil cases, you know, actually physically making one and bringing that into school and having a competition to judge it. And then town maps and conversations, we've done that where we've drawn a map, put buildings on it, and then we've actually created a conversation around it with bubble writing. Okay, right, I'm going to flip over the next two, Zoe, because I think they're the last two. Yeah, so they're dead straightforward. You've got reading cards. You can use different stuff in drama with in drama techniques. That's a really good book, which I think is out of print now, but I've still got it. You could get your student. The bottom right one there was one of my students in year 11 who was selected mute, and she that was the only way she would actually draw. If she was allowed to draw, she would write the words on it and she would say them, and that's the only way I could get her to speak. And then I think the last slide is on the Instagram project, but again, you'll get these slides and you'll see this on the, if you want the slides, just email me, and you'll get that. You'll see what that's all about. And I think we're 4 minutes after. I think we're done.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Elaine. That's great. So yeah, not too many questions. Just most people asking for resources, so particularly the Eiffel Tower. So what I would say is, yeah, if you could email. So both our email addresses are on here: zoe@languagenut.com, elaine@languagenut.com. If you email either of us, and we will send you whichever resources that you'd like. If you just let us know what you would like, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
And if anybody's interested in trying a Language Nut trial, and there's still time to join in the competition, then you can email daniel@languagenut.com. We hope you found it useful today. Sorry we've gone a bit over time. We've just got too many ideas. We're both very creative teachers, but we hope that they've been useful for you. This will all be recorded, and we'll get this out to you as soon as we can. If you found this session useful, please do let your colleagues know, and you know, pass it around. It's really helpful. And if there's any particular topics that you think that you would like us to talk about in future ones, because we will start planning the summer session at some point of webinars, then yeah, please do let us know. Have a lovely evening, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.